The use of excessive force by police against civilians is a sadly common problem today, but what makes it even sadder is the fact that it's nothing new. 80 years ago this week, striking steelworkers in Chicago experienced it for themselves. Here are 5 unforgettable things about the Memorial Day Massacre of 1937. Number 1, it was precipitated by corporate greed. In March 1937, the Steel Workers Organizing Committee, a precursor to today's United Steelworkers Union, signed a new collective bargaining agreement with U.S. Steel, which was then the largest steel manufacturer in the world. Looking to build on that success, the SWOC pursued similar agreements with U.S. Steel's 4 main competitors: Republic Steel, Bethlehem Steel, Youngstown Sheet and Tube, and Inland Steel. The companies were referred to collectively as Little Steel. The steel industry was finally emerging from the Great Depression. The steelworkers of the SWOC seized the moment to push for an 8-hour workday, time-and-a-half pay for overtime, paid vacations, improved health and safety standards, and other guarantees most of us take for granted. But unlike U.S. Steel, Little Steel balked at signing the new contract. On May 26, 1937, the SWOC authorized its workers to go on strike. Number 2, Little Steel planned for violence. Among the holdouts who refused to sign the new contract, the most militantly anti-union was Republic Steel, led by its chairman Tom Girdler. Rather than share his company's profits with the workers in his steel mills, Girdler invested in firearms. When the strike began, Republic Steel maintained a private security force of nearly 400 men, equipped with pistols, rifles, and tear gas. They also had the support of local law enforcement. On May 30, the day before Memorial Day, a crowd of SWOC members, many of whom brought along their wives and children, approached the main gate of Republic Steel's South Chicago plant, the only steel mill in the area to remain open during the strike. They were stopped by a line of 150 officers of the Chicago Police Department. Guess what happened next? Number 3, Chicago police shot and beat unarmed protesters. Exactly what precipitated the violence isn't clear. Apparently, some protesters near the front of the crowd became angry that they weren't being allowed to proceed to the steel mill and began arguing with police. Contemporary newspaper reports claim that some of the protesters were armed with clubs and revolvers and began throwing bricks and steel bolts, forcing the police to defend themselves. But photographs and newsreel footage taken on the day show no evidence of the protesters behaving like a violent mob or carrying anything other than picket signs. And while the police claimed some of the protesters shot at them, there are no records of police receiving gunshot wounds that day. The evidence shows that the only people shot that day were among the striking steelworkers. A total of 40 protesters were shot by the police. All but 4 were shot in the back or the side. 10 were killed. No police were killed, incidentally, and the Chicago Police Department's version of events was repeated in the media. The striking steelworkers were depicted as armed, angry radicals who had brought the violence down upon themselves. The general public didn't get to hear the other side of the story, at least not right away. Number 4, newsreel footage of the massacre was suppressed. A cameraman from Paramount News was on the scene that day and captured footage of the standoff and police shooting at the crowd of fleeing protesters. Executives at Paramount refused to release the film, fearing that the sight of police shooting unarmed civilians, sometimes at point-blank range, would provoke further riots. The newsreel was eventually obtained by U.S. Senator from Wisconsin Robert La Follette Jr., who screened it for a Senate committee that was investigating the massacre. The committee's final report condemned Republic Steel for choosing to invest in a heavily armed private security force rather than guarantee the rights of its workers, and concluded that the Chicago Police Department had used excessive force. Public opinion began to turn in favor of the Union. And yet, Number 5, pro-police, anti-protester sentiments persist to this day. Ultimately, the strike of 1937 failed, but the SWOC did finally sign a new contract with Republic and the other members of Little Steel in 1942, after the U.S. Supreme Court ordered the companies to negotiate with the workers, given the urgent need for steel created by World War II. But the blindly pro-police attitudes that striking steel workers faced in Chicago in 1937 are still with us 80 years later. Today, more often than not, the victims of unjustified police violence are not members of labor unions, but Black Americans and other people of color protesting racial inequalities in law enforcement and the criminal justice system, which disproportionately harm their communities. At Republic Steel's South Chicago plant on May 30th, 1937, 10 unarmed protesters were shot in the back and killed by Chicago police. Not one police officer was ever prosecuted as a result. Today, only 4% of all police officers accused of violating the rights of citizens are prosecuted. We've made great strides in the field of workers' rights since that Little Steel strike of 1937. When it comes to police brutality, we cannot say the same. The hardest part is picking only 5. Catch you next time. Hey folks, hope you found this one worth watching. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching.